Wrong one. Still the wrong one. I don't know where she went. Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with the Chancellor's video. Let's just go on.
Let's do it. So hey everybody, welcome to the 10th annual UT Social Media Week. We have a fantastic session ahead of us for the next 75 minutes or so. My name is Courtney Childers, and I am here to introduce our first presenter, who just happens to be a former student. So today's session is titled Pivoting in a Pandemic, First to Close, Last to Open. And we're going to hear from three representatives of the Country Music Association. And as all of you can, assume, music and entertainment has been hit extra hard with COVID-19 and the pandemic. So we're going to hear and learn from them about how they have really had to pivot, literally, and change their day-to-day responsibilities and duties to deal with everything that's going on. Like I said, a former student is going to help guide our conversation today. Her name is Mary Overend. She graduated with a degree in advertising in 2009. I think she suffered through my class, which was the advertising campaigns class. And she is currently Director, Marketing and Consumer Engagement at the Country Music Association. And she is a marketing professional with over 10 years of experience in nonprofit, healthcare, retail, e-commerce, and entertainment. I've been so delighted and proud to watch Mary grow and have such a successful career in her few years away from UT. So thank you, Mary, for being here, for helping to arrange today's panel. And I will turn things over to you to let you introduce Michael and Tiffany.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Childers. It is awesome to be able to give back to the curriculum that gave so much to me and really set the foundation for my career. I am going to go ahead and screen share the presentation we have. Hopefully I get it done correctly. So as Dr. Childers said, the entertainment industry has been really hit hard, particularly the touring industry, not just of country music, which we represent, but all genres. Broadway has been shut down for months. So we have really tried to figure out how to support our industry in handling this unique and unprecedented, we heard that word a lot a year ago, time that we live in now. Just a brief overview of the agenda. We're going to give you a little context about who CMA is. We don't want to just assume that you know who we are. A look back at a year ago, some messaging strategy shifts that we went through, specifically a live stream variety event that we put on for the first time ever. And then specifically on the industry side, what relief we have provided to the industry, and then we'll open it up for questions. So I am Mary. As Dr. Childers said, graduated in 2009 when the market wasn't great. So a lot of people in my cohort went on to graduate school and things like that. But I ended up moving back to Atlanta and worked in a couple of internships and a job that was really light on digital marketing. And so really where I got my foundation was at my second job, which was Carter's in Oshkosh B'gosh, where I was hired to support social media marketing efforts for both brands, and was exposed to a lot of other disciplines, and including a little bit more hands-on experience with email marketing. And then from there went on to CMA, where I was really hired as the first ever person to be truly dedicated to social marketing, and was able to bring my perspective from previous roles to really set that infrastructure. So I've been there in Nashville for about 6 years, and it's been awesome to see it grow. I now have a coordinator who really oversees the day-to-day operations of our social program, and have been moving more into that customer journey from when we first capture their data into getting them to purchase tickets, watch our shows, things like that, in a new CRM program that we are setting up for the first time ever, which is where Michael has really been involved in as well. So I'm going to pass to Michael to introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael, and my background is actually in the sports space. Prior to coming to CMA, I worked in the sports and entertainment industry, focused on ticketing and marketing strategy for 5 years, working with over 70 different properties across the world. And music has always been calling, so I switched over to CMA and worked with their research team for a couple years, and recently joined our newly formed strategic initiatives team, where we've taken on centralized project management, strategic planning, as well as where Mary was mentioning with CRM, and a more holistic program that we call data architecture, which is just bringing all of our data into one place, being able to see a really clear snapshot of all of our stakeholders that interact with us through a lot of different avenues. So it's a really exciting time for CMA, and one we're kind of on the early stage of some really exciting innovations. I'll throw it to Tiffany.
I am so pumped to be here because I, like Mary, am a UT grad. So go Vols. I actually started my career at UT working in athletics. I was fortunate enough to work for Phil Fulmer. So I am UT prideful through and through. I actually, my first job outside of UT though, I worked for a senator that was actually running for president at the time, and started in politics. I was a pre-law poli-sci major at UT and thought that I probably wanted to get into politics at some point in time. That was short-lived. I decided after politics, I kind of ran towards the nonprofit sector. I wanted to make a difference. I really kind of felt that calling whenever I was in DC, and really wanted to make change. And I hoped that the way to do that was to support nonprofit efforts in local communities. So I went and worked for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation for several years in Knoxville and in the Pacific Northwest. And then it brought me to Nashville. And then I left the nonprofit sector and came to CMA, which is a not-for-profit, which I'll talk about. And I'm really, really fortunate that I oversee the CMA Foundation, which is our nonprofit arm. And I also oversee membership initiatives and government affairs, which is a kind of a new thing for CMA as part of the pandemic. And also our board of directors. We are governed by a very large board, and it takes a lot of coordinating in order to get things done because they are a governing board of directors. So I kind of have my hands in a lot of different things at CMA, as I would say every staff member does. While we have specific positions, our job is to make sure that we're supporting the brand and the company and the organization in any way that we can. So many times we bleed over into other areas of expertise within our organization, but that is a little bit about me. Mary, are you getting it figured out?
I think I am. You've probably seen my eyes shifting around the screen, but I think I'm getting it figured out. But if you'll continue on with just explaining a little bit about who CMA is.
Of course. Okay, so most people know CMA as the CMA Awards. And certainly if you're in Nashville or a true Tennessean, you may know us from the 4-Day Music Festival that we have here, CMA Fest. But at our core, CMA was founded and created in order to make sure there was always an organization focused on making sure country had a place within music. Formed because during the 50s, 60s, you had Elvis Presley, who was doing something unprecedented. He was taking over radio airwaves, and it made people very nervous because country had actually been quite successful on radio. And so you had a group of disc jockeys that came together and said, how do we always make sure moving forward, not just today, you know, and solving the problem and making sure that we're always represented when it comes to consumption? How do we make sure that there's always this guiding organization shepherding our industry through, so that way we're always a strong genre, that we're always, we're always current, we're always thinking about ways to raise the value and certainly raise the awareness of the genre, how do we make sure we do that? And that was how CMA was ultimately created. I would say that, like many businesses, we've had to evolve over time. We have, as being a trade association means that you have members. Those members have to meet a set of criteria in order to join the organization. So we have between 7,000 to 8,000 on any given year. And in order to be a member of the association, you essentially have to meet a set of criteria that include making the majority of your living or income in country music. You have to be supporting it in some form or fashion. So if I'm an advertising agency and I am doing ad campaigns for several artists, you could likely apply to be a member of CMA. Of course, artists are members of CMA, but as you see on the screen below, we have 17 categories. So what makes us a little bit unique, if you look at like-minded organizations like the Grammys, they are focused solely on the creative piece of music, how it's made, how it's curated, how it's brought to fruition. Whereas we are thinking of the industry more broadly. We are thinking about the caterer. We are thinking of the tour manager getting our artist on stage. We are thinking of the artist. We are thinking of the songwriter, the publisher, the label, literally everyone in between. Anyone who is making sure that music, our genre, is thriving, has a place within our organization. It also makes it very complicated because as a trade association, one of the things that most associations do are lobby on the Hill. We do not lobby. We do advocate, but we do not lobby because with 17 key publics, you can imagine that how our radio personnel feel very differently than our DSPs or our digital streaming providers. They feel very differently about certain things, as do publishers. So we make sure that we kind of, what I would say is we are neutral. We try to be as diplomatic as possible and make decisions that benefit the entire industry and moving forward. But what you will certainly learn through this presentation is most brands, most companies, most organizations, institutions, while they always have a typical key public, they're focused on a lot of publics when it comes to messaging. And certainly we are, we are kind of in that similar situation. We have a lot of individuals that we have to be thinking about anytime we're doing any piece of business. So whether it's hosting the CMA Awards or having a membership webinar, we have to be thinking about anyone and everyone in between that could potentially see or be a part of our business. Anything you would want me to add, Michael or Mary?
In the chat, Dr. Hoy asked, what's the difference between lobbying and advocating?
Got it. Lobbying is when you are specifically making a claim to policy. So if I'm pushing policy versus advocating just as, I'll give a great example actually in the pandemic. In the pandemic, the entire industry came together and said, we need the support of the federal government. We didn't push a specific policy. We just said it broadly. So it kind of keeps us, I think, out of getting into very specific nuances. Like if we went out and said there was obviously Save Our Stages, if you're following anything in the music policy space, was a policy that came before Congress where, many venues needed support in order to stay open. While we are so fully supportive of that, we have 17 other categories we have to be thinking about. So we need to make sure that when we say Save Our Stages or when we are encouraging, yes, we absolutely believe in that, we have to say, but we also need to be thinking about the broader industry. We need to be thinking about our mixed income gig workers. We need to be thinking about that front of house engineer that isn't covered by a company or an insurance policy. So the primary difference is one is focused on policy and typically has a lobbyist on staff, or at least has hired a lobbyist outside of the company itself. And then the other one is just broadly speaking, these are the things that would help our industry move forward, if that is helpful. Cool. Oh, these are a lot of brands. Mary, do you want me to speak to this?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have a ton. I will always do a disservice because while you see, 7 brands, 10, less than 10 brands on your screen, there are so many other logos that are not featured on this list. So when you think of CMA as a whole, again, our job is to do everything we can to promote country music and to make sure that the genre is moving forward. So CMA Fest, CMA Awards, and CMA Country Christmas are our consumer facing or public facing, fan facing things that we do. That is honestly the vast majority of our staff. We are focused on those things because they have the greatest impact on our business. However, there are tons of things underneath that that we also support. We are heavily involved in the Country Music Hall of Fame. While yes, there is a museum and they have oversight of that, the Hall of Fame is still a CMA award. The Country Music Hall of Fame induction is something that we are heavily involved and engaged in because we represent country music. So I think that as you think through this and as you hear both me speak and Michael and Mary, what is important to take away is that at any given time, there are dozens of things happening within our building. There are dozens of things that we have to be juggling. And so while the CMA Awards happen in November, CMA Fest happens in June, all of these other things are essentially happening and ongoing throughout the year. So our songwriter series are a way for us to elevate and highlight the incredible work that songwriters do. The CMA Foundation is our charitable arm that's doing really great, powerful work, because I'm biased, of course, but doing really, really great work in bringing music participation for all students, K through 12. CMA EDU is our collegiate effort where we are trying to make sure there is a healthy pipeline of talent coming from universities and moving into the music industry. The music industry is not a taught subject matter or even, I don't even know that it can appropriately be taught. There are so many things that are so unique to the music industry that I often have in the last 12 months heard the music industry referred to as a band of gypsies or a band of hustlers. Like, we will figure it out. And there are so many people that, didn't necessarily find their way didn't find their way to the music industry in a traditional manner. And so we're trying to make sure that college students are at least being advised, educated, and shepherded through what is a tour manager? What does the music industry's ecosystem look like? And while, of course, we do it through the lens of country, country is no different, little differences between any of the other genres. We as an industry are structured in a very unique and somewhat complex way. So making sure that we are guiding a pipeline and making sure that we have a pipeline to pull from is important. And we do that through our EDU efforts. And then CMA Mics, I'll talk about a little bit later, but that's our effort in getting the industry on its feet, both now, but also in the future as a result of the pandemic. But again, these are just snapshots. These are examples of the kinds of things that we do year round. It is certainly not the only thing, because I can think of 10 other things that are not on this sheet. But I think, again, if you were trying to raise the profile and keep an entire industry healthy and secure, you can imagine you have to support it from every angle, from a fan perspective, from a mental health perspective, and making sure that the community stays strong and making sure that there's additional education. We have to do everything we can to make sure that the industry is moving forward. And it's quite the task.
Thank you for that, Tiffany.
Of course.
I think in my eyes, I think we all assume, being in our space, that we assume that everybody understands the full breadth of what CMA means. But being able to give everybody that context, I think, is really helpful so that they kind of further understand the rest of the presentation going forward. So the real meat of the presentation, pivoting in a pandemic. My slide will swap over. So if you'll remember back to March, almost a year ago of last year, some of the headlines coming up specifically in the music area was festivals being postponed. The city of Austin actually forced South by Southwest to be canceled, so they didn't really even themselves get a good handle on being able to control that message. A little bit closer to home for everybody on this call, the SEC men's basketball tournament, which was supposed to be hosted in Nashville, was canceled 1 hour before the Tennessee-Alabama tip-off. So there was a lot of nervousness around what was happening, and people, I think, were truly scared. You had people waiting in line at Costco for hours trying to get toilet paper, which is still humorous to me that that's like the #1 thing people wait in line for. But just trying to mentally take everybody back to what was the mentality around that time, because it further explains how we participated in that conversation. So the first big thing we had to tackle was announcing that we were going to not be able to hold our CMA Fest in June, which would have been, we talk about it so much now, I'm going to get it confused, but I think it would have been the 48th consecutive year. So we chose to postpone until 2021 and really focused on implementing an integrated multi-platform announcement of our event so that we were clear in our communication from a PR standpoint, from a social media standpoint, to emails directly to people who had purchased passes, whether they were first-time ticket purchasers or they're our most loyal fans and they've been attending for 10 or more years. There was a little bit of a nuance in why we said postpone instead of cancel, and that was really around wanting our fans to be able to roll their passes over to next year. So our festival is pretty unique in that we take place in Nissan Stadium. So there are actual seats that you are assigned to, a little bit similar to like a season ticket holder for sports. Unlike other festivals where you have a big open space and only a few entrance gates and you just are wherever you are. So that was something unique to us that we had to kind of work through with our partners at Ticketmaster on making sure that we allowed people to roll over the passes if they wanted to continue holding on to their specific seats. And then the other reason we use this is because there was a lot of questions. If you look at the landscape of what other festivals were doing at that time, which was, oh, we're going to just hold off for a few months and hold this event in the fall, which now thinking back is pretty funny that we thought anybody could do that at that time. But a little bit more insight on CMA Fest. In addition to having nightly concerts at Nissan Stadium, we take over the core of downtown Nashville. So we use the Music City Convention Center. We have used the Ascend Amphitheater. So those are all other venues that we use in addition to just the Nashville downtown streets. That it's really difficult to just pick up our festival and move it to a different weekend that people are completely unprepared for. To be able to secure the stadium, secure the amphitheater, secure the convention center, and secure everything in the downtown community is very, very difficult for us. And again, goes back to the comparison to other festivals that other people just don't have those challenges that we have in just the nature of our festival. Along with that communication plan, we had a customer service team, which consisted of a lot of internal people, really leveraging the existing talent and not looking outside. So it was pretty choreographed in a cross-departmental approach. We flipped entirely the CMA Fest website. So a website that typically would have been hosting lineup and talent announcements and how do I get to Nashville? What do I do once I get there? All that kind of stuff. We completely wiped the website and just had a one-page splash with key information, FAQs, how to get in touch with a real live human. That was pretty important to us. We were seeing in the landscape of festivals a lot of frustration about like, I can't just get a person on the phone to talk about my passes that I have several $100s roped into. In addition to hotel and travel and all that kind of stuff of people getting to Nashville. So it was important for us to have several people, even if we overstaffed it a little, to have enough people available to make these personal phone calls back to everybody who contacted us so that we could have a personal conversation with them and really just listen. We knew at the end of the day that people really just wanted to be heard. So that was something that we really prioritize internally in making sure those customer service inquiries were all resolved in a positive way. So from a social media perspective, once we made that announcement, yep.
If you'll also explain, because we wanted to make sure that we had staff members that were on site and able to answer these phone calls, it also guided us in the day. So if you'll just explain, like, rather than us doing it on a Friday because we were going into a weekend, all of those things, because that was part of the strategy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember exactly what day of the week it was, but that is certainly something we wanted to keep in mind. We didn't want to just post this on social media at, 3 o'clock on Friday, and then have the customer service lines only open for a couple of hours, and then just send people into complete frustration from that time through Monday morning when they opened again. So we were very thoughtful about making sure that we did it at the right day of the week at the right time, so that we had plenty of time for people to reach out to us and ask questions and request refunds if that's what they wanted to do, and not just have a terrible experience of calling in and just getting a, we're closed for business. So yeah, Tiffany, thank you for bringing that up. From a social perspective, once we put out that announcement, there was some mix of emotions. Again, if you think back to that time, people were, disappointed, but they were also really understanding. I think everybody was pretty scared. They're being told to stay at home. Nobody's going to school. Nobody's going to work. So we saw an overwhelming, pretty positive response to our message, which we were thankful for, and we're certainly focused on interacting with those people to make sure, again, that they felt heard and appreciated as fans of our festival. And when it comes from a messaging standpoint, we really had to shift what our plans were, which during that like March to June timeframe is super focused on announcing stages with sponsors and who's appearing on the stages, which days and times they're appearing on, and all that kind of stuff. So we had to scrap all of those plans, things that we've been working on for quite a while, and really focused on appreciating the fan and bringing back some past fond memories that people have of our festival. And then shifting a little bit more into some new playlisting efforts that we were working through internally with the Greetings from Home concept, which you'll see coming up. And then Michael is really going to dive deep on the CMA Summer Staycay, which was our first ever digital content programming, which we are all really proud of. And I just want to note here that in this instance, I would say, generally speaking, metrics are really important from a social standpoint. When I hire people, I try to hire people that have a good mix of the creative and the analytical. And I just wanted to note something unique in this scenario is that metrics didn't matter. So it was really focused on what we're saying to people and how we're saying it with love and compassion, and making sure that people knew that they were important to us, and we certainly were wanting them to return to the next festival. So again, focusing on that sense of love, we heart our fans, country music is about real life, and even though our festival won't take place, we're with you. So just thinking again back to that time frame and the mindset that everybody was in, providing some support. So we understand it's difficult. We mentioned for the first time what we were doing from a music industry perspective to provide that support, with a $1 million pledge to Music Cares and their relief fund. Providing a sense of joy, shifting that message from a little bit of sadness and disappointment into like, remember the good times, like we will get back to this at some point. We don't know when, nobody knows when, but just repurposing some old content and really focusing on those moments of joy that the festival brings so many people over the years. And a sense of comfort. So we have quite an arsenal of content from various CMA events, as Tiffany spoke to, and programs. So these were existing quotes we had from Chris Stapleton, Luke Bryan, Carrie Underwood, that we repurposed because they were still applicable to this time, in trying to provide some comfort to people at that time. And then kind of shifted more, trying to think of a timeline. We're starting like end of May into June into focusing on how do we engage with people on socials. So if you remember the Choose Your Quarantine House, this was a trend that you probably saw throughout social media. So we picked it up and really focused on our CMA Entertainer of the Year category, throwing those into some house examples and seeing what people interacted with. So we saw high engagement there across all of our platforms for content like that. Again, some examples of memories. And then the greetings from home concept, which was the brainchild of a graphic designer of ours and our digital project manager. So, you know, we wanted to think through the fact that people are spending so much time in their own homes and everybody's getting a little bit stir crazy, not able to socialize with people outside of digital executions on Zooms and all that kind of stuff. So they had this amazing concept to have greetings from home, greetings from my living room, greetings from the patio, and associating a CMA curated playlist with each of those. And we were blown away by the success of it. We use a link aggregator platform for music specifically called Linkfire, and saw 50% click through and about 24,000 landing page visitors just from organic social posts during that time. So we were really excited, and that has actually kickstarted what we had been working on internally, but just kind of accelerated a process that we were already working towards to really ramp up our music curation efforts. The next several slides just click through some of the artist support from an organic standpoint. This is not something that we went to the artist teams to say, hey, we're working on this, like, would love for you to support it. They naturally at that time were just really hungry for content. You got to think all these artists who would have been on summer tours or off the road, some of them in a creative mindset, working on new music and stuff like that. So those were some examples of how the artists really supported from an organic standpoint. And then we shifted our messaging into CMA Summer Staycay with this beautiful, bright, happy branding. And Michael will dive into this, and you'll get to see later just how many artists we had in this program and how they supported it.
In reality, we wanted to create a brand that hit on our fantasy of imagining Nashville and a great beach location year round. So it was phenomenal to be able to kind of think beyond and have an asset that we were really proud of. You know, Mary talked a lot about how our communication with our festival and just trying to increase engagement was trying to address a lot of pieces within a kind of a scary, uncertain time. We didn't know what was going to be happening within the summer. We didn't know what fall was going to look like. But we knew that we had to figure out a way to deliver some type of happiness, some type of inclusion within our country family. And what we opted to do is really go back to the drawing board. And for the first time in CMA's history, we had a moment in the late spring, early summer where we had headspace to think about a new concept. Going back to Tiffany's piece about how CMA has a lot of tentacles that may not always be public facing. But without Fest, we're able to then take our marketing, creative teams, PR, our membership and live events team and think differently about what we could do. The output of that was an event we called CMA Summer Staycay. And Mary, you can go ahead and click to the next slide. And Staycay was a virtual event that we created that lived on Facebook and YouTube right at the start of July. We knew that our CMA Fest event always traditionally tied to a TV broadcast. That was being translated now to a Best of Fest program that was going to be taking place in early July. And we wanted to figure out a way to create some excitement, but also to provide a broader experience for our artists who had been sitting at home, maybe challenged within their fan interactions, to have a home that they could celebrate with us in the summertime leading into our Best of Fest TV special. What came out of this was a 4-hour hosted program, all live and one hit on July 1st, right at the start of summer. This is actually a really important time for country music. That week of July 4th is typically our highest week of streamed music. No shock when you think about the brand around country music kind of being a fun, lively, really tied in with American holidays, but it also fit within our timeline, right? Let's go with a peak on peak for a new content idea that we're launching. We wanted to have a lot of flexibility in this artist-driven content. So instead of it CMA saying we're doing XYZ, we go and talk to all the artists about how they want to engage with their fans. Everybody was putting out music at the time. Everybody was doing concerts early in that spring to summer window. And we knew we needed to find some differentiation between what was happening with a individual acoustic and a guitar at their home versus what fans wanted to see if they were at a venue. And the last piece is we really wanted to be positive, right? We talked about this imagery. I kind of made a horrible joke about the fantasy of like imagining Nashville or being in Tennessee at a beach, but it's in essence what we wanted to bring to everybody. Everyone's stuck at home. How can we kind of push their mentality into something more positive? Maybe if you want to click the next slide. So from the onset, we had 4 clear success goals. First being that we wanted to make sure that whatever event we created aligned with our strategic plan of domestic and international growth. It's a little odd for us to be thinking about a very Americanized genre with country music and think about international tie-in. But if you think about CMA Fest as an event, about 10% of our ticket holders for CMA Fest are internationals. Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, throughout South America, we have many places in Europe. And so those are fans that are eager to interact with CMA as a brand. So we know we have international exposure, even if the artists don't. We ended up actually having 42 countries with individuals viewing the content from CMA Summer Staycay. The second piece was we wanted to integrate back to that Best of Fest TV special. And the third is really trying to position ourselves. If we're doing a Best of Fest TV special that's all clips of the past 5 to 10 years of Fest to that point, we need to be something different. It can't be pre-recorded. It needs to feel like it's energetic. It needs to have some liveliness. It needs to almost have some fan interaction in some ways to push it differently than what's happening on the TV front. And the last piece, as we mentioned, is this fan destination, the Staycay piece. We'll be really transparent and say this was a full experiment for CMA. We had no idea how this would go. We had estimations of millions and millions of views to us falling flat on our face. But I think what was different for us going through COVID and a pivot was that we were willing to use our brand to take a risk and to really understand the engagement we get from our artists and our partners to try to hit these success goals. What did this actually translate into? We're going to give you a few examples and we'll have a short video a little bit later on, but we went to the drawing board with these artists and said, what would you like to do? How would you like to interact with your fans? But better yet, how might you want to interact with other artists that you don't get to see or interact with maybe on tour or throughout the year? We ended up having 6 different categories of content, from things such as Q&As to looking back at Fest memories, unique performances, but some of the fun ones were surprise fan moments. We hooked Jason Aldean up with a fan kind of carousel of question and answer series. Cole Swindell actually popped into a bachelorette party live and surprised that whole group, which was a really special moment. But what was really interesting from a content angle is that we're able to spotlight not just the music, but the personalities. And some of the individuals that we chose to highlight were not high brand power artists. And so we're trying to figure out ways that if music's not speaking, we can push them in different ways. And so you can see just within our participating acts list, and I'm not going to talk through all of these, but the breadth is really important. So from a marketing angle, we had to have strong star power to at least get some viewership as a foundation. So you see the likes of Kane Brown, Jason Aldean, Luke Combs, all of them we knew would share on their platforms and push our live viewing and post live. But at the same time, we're looking at breadth of new talent. Everybody might be really excited about Breland and his My Truck. He just went really big on TikTok with Chevy over the past week, but we spotlighted him in Staycay in July. But that also interacted with Ingrid, who actually won a CMA award and performed at the CMA Awards because she was a Best New Artist category nominee. And lastly, it's about the different genres that are actually within our country umbrella. So we have the likes of a Lauren Elena, more poppy, kind of fresh, more modern sounding country, to someone like Brantley Gilbert, who's backwoods country and rough and tumble guy. And we're able to spotlight all of that within one segment to really show the breadth and the kind of the excitement that's happening within our genre. We chose to leverage this mainly within kind of the three traditional outlets: owned, earned, and paid through our assets. Owned is an exciting piece for us. Obviously, we have full control over how we leverage these assets, but we have anything from 4.3 million followers on social, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, leveraging heavily our email subscribers. We average about 200,000 that are constantly engaged with us. That means they're clicking on our emails regularly and actually reading them or clicking through to that promotion that we've offered to them. We also have our own CMA Fest app that has 19,000 users. It's also a huge data collection portal for us, so we're able to really highly segment that targeting. And we have our brand power through digital assets like CMAfest.com and DSPs. Spotify, we have CMA playlists like Mary was mentioning, so we can leverage those followers to push this. The real exciting piece for CMA is this earn column. We're able to leverage our board relationships, the vast industry of our 6,500 to 7,000 members to really look at ways that they can help promote this event. That's where the synergy also comes in from ABC or TV partner, as well as looking at this breadth of radio nationwide and each radio station getting engaged and starting to push this within their individual local markets. The earned support is what really pushes our views and gets our marketing back to our fan base. We might be really proud of 4.3 million, but it's the aggregate of our artists and radio and ABC that actually is the bigger worth to us. And that's what we try to leverage. So Mary and her team are very intentional to make an investment in creating assets that are easily shareable from a general level, as well as individualized to all of our partners. They can easily go and grab from templates and share out. And you can kind of see that symmetry here within our branding. Jimmy Allen's, Maddie and Tay's, very similar hits. What gets exciting for us is when we get a pickup from our TV partner who this has no benefit to them outside of just being a good individual, good partner to us that's sharing it, as well as Amazon Music. You might not be able to see it, but on the far right-hand side, you'll see three female artists. That is Lauren Elena, Lindsay L, and Cassidy Pope. And they did a cover of a Garth Brooks song and Garth shared it. That was one of our biggest posts, something completely organic, an artist being excited about another artist, and then us leveraging that to attract people back to YouTube or Facebook views. It was a massive win for us organically. We were really excited as well to bring an untested concept to a partner, and Budweiser actually jumped on board to support this initiative. And we can be proud about the work we do all day long, but in essence, Budweiser and similar partners are more excited about the worth we get from the artist connections. And so just with Stay K alone, we had 63 artists share the Budweiser logo who may or may not have had a partnership with that brand individually. That equates to about 252 posts that included Budweiser itself. The value, though, is we have 57 million Facebook impressions, 25,000 Twitter impressions, and 14 million Instagram impressions without any paid media on the part of Budweiser or CMA. With the experimentation mindset, we took that more internally and said, what are these other additional things that we can do to bring in maybe some things that we've had on the back table that we've just wanted to throw and see what sticks to things that maybe we wanted to make sure that we're going to have a new audience potentially with Stay K, and how do we attack them? So we had fully created brand websites and app touch points. We completely reskinned everything to make it look and feel around that Stay K moniker. We launched a Stay K themed merch line. And we actually took our data capture program and completely refocused it around Stay K. That then led into customized playlisting, really similar to what Mary launched us off with. But also we went back to the foundation and created a music camp program. And we had artists submit 1 to 2 minute long videos teaching you how to play guitar or to do a vocal lick. But this was all new things that we haven't done before, just to see what kind of engagement we would want to get, maybe put some investment in the next coming years. I think, Mary, you have a quick video just to show you what Staycay looked like to our viewers. I'll do a shameless plug to say that Staycay is still live and able to be viewed on YouTube. It's an exciting, action-packed 4-hour adventure of country music that we would highly recommend you all check out. But to us, one of the biggest pieces here was that we ended up garnering 2.2 million views within a 48-hour period. And for us, we've not released any customized content that was able to get that type of scale before in our past. So it was a really exciting piece that gained momentum for us. It got our board excited. It got our leadership excited. But it actually was the top ranked concert live stream that week as well. So we won in terms of the charts when there was a lot of competition for views at that point. We had over 53 segments published on Facebook and YouTube. So everything was delivered individually for the artist as well as packaged as a full show. We had a 24.5 minute average view on YouTube. We were blown away by this fact. Our YouTube engagement wasn't nearly as strong, but we noticed when they were on YouTube, they watched it more like a TV show. They came in at segments they liked and they stayed for quite a long time over the 4-hour span. We had 10% international views, which hit on one of our strategic goals of making sure we had that international pillar. We had massive artist support. And as we mentioned, we got support from Budweiser. For us, the key takeaway, if you wanted to wrap that up, is we gained a lot of confidence in ourselves, really thought through collaboration, but showed the power of our brand. And I think we came away out of COVID saying we pivoted to something that was unknown territory to something now that we're actually investing in and exploring more intentionally over the next year.
Thank you, Michael. Next up is Tiffany, who's going to speak more to the industry-facing part of our efforts recently.
Okay, so you obviously heard a lot, and I kind of covered a lot of this at the top, but CMA Fest, CMA Summer Staycade, CMA Awards, those are things that we are focused on the consumer fan. Again, the nice thing is that if we are hoping that the genre moves forward, we have to be thinking about not only music consumption, but also music discovery. So we look at all of those properties as opportunities for artists to be discovered. You look at the Chris Stapleton effect. I think that's probably the most widely and well-known discoveries. He and his co-collaborator, Justin Timberlake, on the award show a few years ago. So we're always thinking about how do we utilize our key public, being our fan and consumer, in order to further the mission of the organization, making sure that artists are being developed and found, making sure that songs are being sold. Again, how do we use our properties, our voice, to create a lift and leverage so that the entire industry is successful. Then there is the membership that I talked about at the top of the presentation, and that is our 7,500 members that make up all parts of the industry. How do we make sure that we're programming and engaging with them in a meaningful and thoughtful way that, again, moves the industry forward? Same thing with EDU. How do we make sure that we properly engage with them, but also educate? So that way, if they choose to become a member of the organization or choose to work in the industry, that they are prepared. And then, of course, education and philanthropy. And again, I'm just showing examples of key publics that we're always being mindful of and thinking through, because it's important to know that while our socials are fan facing, we always have to make sure that if Mary is putting something out to the consumer, that we're thinking about what is the message to our fans. Is there something that we also need to make sure the foundation is sharing or complimenting, and vice versa? All of those things, if you think of us as, spokes in a wheel, we all have to be kind of working in tandem, or otherwise it's just not going to work. So I think that is an important piece to understand, because this isn't just unique to CMA. This is certainly happening within a lot of other organizations, companies, and brands. Next. So at the onset of the pandemic, when I was fortunate enough to sit down, obviously, with our CEO and our board of directors, we said, okay, as a trade association, as a membership run and focused organization, how do we make sure that the industry thrives in a moment in time, in a moment in history, when we are essentially being pummeled. We started early on noticing that when you think of the music industry, everything lies at the, the center of the universe for all of us is the artist. Well, the artist employs a heck of a lot of people, and country more specifically, the artist revenue share predominantly comes from live music performance. And so if they were no longer going to be on tour, there's not tour income, but there's also not certain partnership income. It kind of shifted their entire business portfolio. It showed that I think it really highlighted that we were putting ourselves at risk by being so heavily focused on the live event portion of how the industry makes a living. And so we were tasked internally to say, okay, the music industry is obviously faced with something that it's never been faced with before. Really, everybody in the music industry is touching this in some capacity, is feeling the impact in some capacity. Some, harsher than others. If you were a touring person, if you were a part of the touring personnel, you haven't worked since last March. You have had to go out and find a bridge job or something in between to help make ends meet. And what we also found is that most of our touring personnel, because they were not employed by a company per se, they don't have a 401k to pull from. They honestly love what they do and they're passionate about it, but they also don't typically have monthly bills the way the rest of us do because they're out on the road 10, 11 months out of the year. They're not around, their family typically is their road crew. And so this started to have a ripple effect in ways that now that I'm in what I would say is coming out on the other side of it, I can say it felt very, very heavy at the onset. CMA decided to launch a program called the Music Industry COVID Support Initiative, which we call CMA Mics for short. And what we aimed to do was identify areas that we could help support the music industry. Mental health was a key component of that. Mary, if you'll go to the next slide, please. Mental health was a key component of that. Making sure that we were helping guide individuals in identifying and also securing state and federal funding. Many of our folks have never had to file for unemployment, so they weren't even sure what that was like. At the onset of the pandemic, most unemployment didn't cover gig workers because they are mixed income earners. They couldn't actually prove that they worked for a specific company because they were, hired as a person. They were a 1099. You'll learn all about this whenever you graduate. Trust me, a lot of very interesting components to certainly getting a job in the music business, but there was so much complexity around our industry. And so with all of that, we as the organization we are responsible. We truly believe that we carry the key in order to move the industry forward. We had to think of all of these ways to, again, guide the industry moving forward. And it has not been easy. I think about yesterday, I was fortunate enough to go to a food distribution site. We were giving hot meals to individuals that have lost all of their income, some of their income, or quite frankly, needed a hot meal for mental health purposes. I just needed to get out of my house and see another individual in the music industry. And so I spent 2 hours doing that yesterday and heard a wide variety of stories. Things like I've had to give up my pets because I can no longer afford them. I've had to sell all my gear because I needed income. Thinking about, we know people that have had to sell their house. Many actually that have had to sell their house and downsize. And I share all of that because I think most people think of an artist being very wealthy. So of course they're fine and they should pay all of their people. If you think about how you consume anything, I think about Amazon, for instance. If Amazon shut down and they had no revenue coming in, there is no way they could float their entire company of staff. I don't know anybody that can, any brand that can do that. And so I think it is somewhat unfair to assume that artists can do the same thing. Artists are employers, they are companies at the end of the day. And so I think that so many, because our industry is so unique, country specifically, many of our artists they truly took care of their people as long as they could. Some of our bigger artists, they're going to take care of their people through the end of the summer. Some could take care of them for a few months. Some could take care of them through the end of last year, but at the end of the day, the teams are so big that they're supporting. And the other thing that's very unique to country is that many of these individuals that you see on this list are salaried. And that doesn't happen in rock and pop. The other thing that I should mention is we also, as a organization, felt that we couldn't just help out country music in this moment, because country music isn't going to thrive if the rest of the music industry is decimated, right? So we also said that as part of our Mike's program, as part of the $3 million commitment that we made at the very beginning of the pandemic, we needed to make sure that this was all inclusive of all genres. So we may be helping out a pop, act or a rock tour manager. For us, it didn't really matter. As long as they were in the music industry, in our sphere, in our ecosystem, we wanted to be supporting them in any way that we could. I think that when Mary and I were first talking about this, we were like, what's something that we definitely want to make sure that you all walk away with? And it's thinking of this from the perspective of an artist and their socials. Many of them, some have come out and said, I need you to help support my crew. Some are also very nervous to have outwardly messaging that conveys that, because fans naturally assume that they should be paying their people because they're very wealthy. And I think the context to have is that there are so many people involved. A large tour, think of the largest artists you listen to, whether it be The Weeknd or Taylor Swift or Bono. They're employing anywhere from 200 to 300 people one night at their show. And those are the individuals that are traveling with them. And so I share that because I think artists, there is this pride piece where they care deeply about their people, and they're conflicted because they want their fans to know that, man, I really want you to know that the entire ecosystem is crumbling. But at the same time, I don't want you to think that I don't care enough about my people to finance them. And so we are seeing this very interesting moment in time where artists are kind of at loss for what to put out to the general public. It's something that CMA has actually talked about on numerous occasions. How do we maybe take this time to educate folks on who actually supports the artist, whether it's the artist management team or their touring personnel, really understanding how many people are involved in supporting the artist community, which naturally supports all of music. And I think that there is a ways to go. Certainly, I anticipate that we will slowly start to do that, to make sure that people understand there is this whole behind the scenes that never wants you to know that they're there. There's a reason why most people on a crew wear all black. They do not want to know that you're there, but they are absolutely the reason you get to enjoy live shows. And those individuals feel forgotten. They feel unseen. And so it is our job to make sure that we are doing everything as the trade association. If I think about the inception of CMA, why we were created in the first place is because we felt like we were at risk of losing a lot. And we kind of are in the same situation come 2020, 21. We feel like we're at risk, and we have to do everything in our power to keep our little network, keep our ecosystem safe, confident, and also keep us focused on the future, what reopening looks like, how we do it safely. So there are a lot of conversations happening above what the general public may see as CMA Fest, CMA Awards, our general public facing properties. There's so much happening behind the scenes to just make sure that when we come back, we're able. And so I share that because we're unique, but it is important to know if there is anything that I want you to walk away with from my, presentation specifically, it's for you to know that there are a lot of people that make up what you would consider a really good experience at a concert. And certainly if you're ever in a situation where you can educate a peer, a friend, a family member, please do so, because it isn't as black and white as I support a wealthy or a rich, artist and they should be supporting their people. There are so many people involved in this ecosystem. So we pulled together some really, I think, eye-opening and very transparent quotes for you, things that we are exposed to daily right now. But ultimately, I am confident that we are going to be able to come out of this stronger because we're taking our time right now to also learn about the things we could do better. It's very hard to prepare in a crisis, but I think the silver lining is that now that the crisis has happened, we're better prepared for the next one. I think that's it from me, Mary.
It is. Thank you, Tiffany. And we are now going to open it up for any questions. So if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat. I think I've captured the ones that have been asked so far. Dr. Childers, did you see any that I missed?
I have not, no.
Okay. Well, we provided some contact information here, how you can find us on LinkedIn, and if you'd like to email us, we certainly would love to hear from you. But we appreciate the time, we appreciate the invitation, and let's see.
Mary, we had one question. I answered it via the Q&A function, but
Okay.
happy to talk about it here if we have time.
Yeah.
Anybody else interested? So
Sure.
we had someone ask about the industry overall in terms of returning back to in-person shows, and I guess as we talked about summer staycay and the prominence of live streams, how does that then play? What we're seeing from an industry level is that the virtual show component is probably not actually going away. It may be consistent or even strengthened as we looked over the next few years. We're hearing more and more artists, labels, managers, what have you, talk about adding that into their playbook. So it's one extra opportunity for them to interact with fans. You even see it with, Luke Combs last week put out a full concert that he did in Lexington. So I think there might be more transparency and more of an openness to understanding there's a much broader digital fan base than what you get to interact with on tour through these one night shows, right? So how can you keep Salt Lake City still engaged, even if you're not there on, July 17th? And the other piece of that is when we look at live shows, momentum is coming. We're seeing a lot more socially distanced shows happening, especially in states that have been a little bit more open on their COVID policies. So at Texas, for instance. But ultimately, as Tiffany mentioned, the industry is kind of gearing up for a late fall 2022 to be fully back on and normal. The industry has been quite a bit crippled in terms of employment, and being able to even go full go if we knew we could next month isn't possible. We've lost a lot of production companies, and we're trying to figure out that logistics end. So there's a rebuilding, let alone the COVID impact of just being able to be back together in person. But 2022 is something we're really looking forward to and optimistic. And I know that sounds far away, but that's more of the, I guess, legitimate timeline for Knoxville or any city to really start to see live shows back normally at a regular pace.
And I would add to one of the things that has been really unique at, AEG and Live Nation pretty much control the market when it comes to touring. I think they are wrestling right now with, do you have to have the vaccine? Do you not have to have the vaccine? Not to mention that insurance has changed drastically since the onset of the pandemic. So while it used to be that the venue would take quite a bit of the insurance and the risk, they are asking artists to do that. Well, artists aren't comfortable with that either. So there is kind of this, there are a lot of conversations happening about what does it look like moving forward? Do you completely, do you ask people to sign waivers when they go to anything and assume all of the risk? There are a lot of moving parts right now that I think everybody in the industry is trying to figure out, because the pandemic, added this whole layer of complexity to it. And so the risk factor is certainly something that is being discussed. And I think that will certainly play a role in how fast and how large live events comes back.
What's interesting, Jared just posted in the Q&A that, is this a beneficial, like almost an optimistic perspective? Is it beneficial for students or maybe new blood wanting to get in the music industry? And I think that's probably a fair perspective, because what's going to happen is there's going to be a hiring wave. And Tiffany, jump in if you disagree, but we're going to see a hiring wave. But actually on the second end, what I know CMA is really passionate about and interested in there's more interest in really understanding what are the technical skills that need to be implied within the music industry. You know, we're talking with the Tennessee Department of the Workforce, and they're telling us they look to the music industry for critical thinkers, people that can solve things on their feet, project managers, logistics help. But our workforce doesn't know how to put that on a resume yet. They don't need to do that. It's all, you know, hand-in-hand contact. So I think you're going to see a professionalism wave happen within the industry as well, especially within our logistics and backline. I think you're going to see a lot of new blood and innovation that's being pushed in when this gets more digital based. So it is a really good opportunity for you as students interested in the industry to think about where there's potential opportunities for me to jump in with my skill sets. Who are the really exciting companies to look at? You know, I would suggest looking at companies like PRG, which you may not know of at all, but they are a production supplier and a logistics company, right? I know you guys have a really big logistics school from a management angle. So there are all these different elements in the industry that kind of provide opportunity.
That was a great question. There's another question from Jackson. What's the most difficult part of keeping fans happy and interactive? I would say the most difficult thing is what is completely out of our control. So, you know, COVID itself became pretty politicized. You know, I talked a lot about like the March through June. Michael talked about July timeframe. But when we started getting towards the presidential election, that was really difficult for us to figure out how to navigate those waters and kind of play Switzerland. So certainly that was difficult at that time, but specific to the festival and having to postpone it last year, just not knowing what the outside world was like and how it was going to impact us made it a little bit difficult for figuring out how we message to fans outside of just trying to continue keeping that positive attitude that we don't know when, but eventually, you know, events like ours will return and your favorite artist tours will come back eventually. So really just things outside of our control are the most difficult.
Mary, will you also talk to how we also have to make sure that whatever we're posting is in lockstep with the industry too? So while CMA may feel one way, we have to make sure that we don't ostracize any of our artists because they're members.
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly keep in mind that at our core, we're a membership-based organization. So from a consumer perspective, it looks to the outside world through the CMA Fest, through the CMA Awards, through our Christmas show, that we are a privately held country music business, but at our core, we are made up of members of the industry. So everything we do, especially from a messaging standpoint and how we present the industry, always keeps that is always kept at the forefront of our brains in everything that we do. Thanks, Tiff.
I think we have one more question, Mary.
I think it's a compliment.
In chat, maybe.
Yeah, I think Courtney asked one.
Yeah. With the virtual content, releases of music, could it actually hurt live events and getting back to work? Certainly, I would ask all of my colleagues to engage in this answer. I would say that the minute we are able to be live, we will be live. Artists, there is nothing like a live show. There is just nothing like it, and they crave it. It also feeds a creative capacity in their brain. So a lot of them don't even feel like they can create like they once did because they're not getting that experience. So certainly, to Michael's point, it's going to be a part of how we do business moving forward, but it will not be the sole business as it is right now. The minute that folks can be out there, they're going to be out there.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the mental health issue too. You see a lot of people struggling because they're not having any face-to-face, in-person human interaction. And a lot of that comes from, like, if you think of yourself in Neyland Stadium at a UT football game, like, you're so excited to be there because you're surrounded by 102,000 or whatever the current capacity is of people who are passionate about the exact same thing that you are. And that's the exact same kind of sense of adrenaline and excitement that you get from being in an arena with, you know, 20,000 of your fellow Casey Musgraves fans. Like, you all know all the lyrics, you've all watched the music videos, you all know her personal life. So it's that sense of like being with people with similar interests that I think is really important to helping us overall improve mental health in getting out of this whole COVID pandemic.
I 100% agree, and I hope that live concerts come back sooner rather than later. I think that the reason that I asked that question is that we've heard from several speakers this week that there may be things about the pandemic that don't really go back to quote normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there are things that are going to stick around. And as someone who follows a few of your country music acts on social, they're trying to do things creatively and get music out and engage fans, of course. So I guess I had some kind of a concern that these virtual concerts would be one of the pandemic items to stick around for a while. So I'm glad to hear that live music will come back.
I think one of the cool things though, Courtney, is it's upgraded the digital aptitude in the industry significantly. And also from a data angle too, like labels and managers and anybody that's interested in the revenue pipelines for these artists now understand how much of a digital presence is important. They're now investing back into that. And we've actually seen some labels starting to recruit from digital outlets more so now than they have in the past. Like there's definitely TikTok country stars that are getting signed to really prominent, good brand worthy labels. And they're prepping to then transition them back into a kind of hybrid traditional music sense, but also leveraging this digital content. So I think for country, we're actually going to see us come out of this in a much different light than maybe industries that are saying, okay, we're done, with having to be together. Like we can do everything virtually. We're going to be done with this piece. It's actually like we've just expanded everything. we've blown it up, and we're keeping all the great things we love about what makes country special, and adding all these things to expand our footprint.
That answer makes me happy, and I'm sure that there's a lot of smiling faces on all these black boxes that we cannot see. Right now, I hear from students all the time that one of their, big misses right now with the pandemic is definitely that interaction and the live events that, kind of make up your college experience, to be completely honest. So.
Absolutely.
Well, without COVID, I don't think you would have gotten as many Luke Combs unreleased tracks as you've gotten. And I think that's what's really cool too, is like maybe the management teams have kind of loosened up a bit. So if that continues with touring, with album cycles, the fan experience is only going to be better going forward. So that's something to get excited about.
Well, I want to say thank you to all three of you. What a fantastic session. I loved all the imagery that you provided, and it truly was a case study of how you all pivoted in a pandemic. Nothing trains you for this, right? Like there is no class that we can provide you with. There is no experience that had any of us ready to just change everything due to COVID-19. So thank you for sharing your time and your expertise and all your experience in dealing with this situation. And I think we all want concerts live and in person as soon as possible. So thank you all. The last thing I want to say is that our final event of this year's UT Social Media Week takes place at 6 p.m. tonight. You can go to utsocialmediaweek.com for the Zoom link, and that will feature a keynote session with Adam Brown, an executive strategist at Salesforce. And in addition to that, Ad Club and PRCSA are helping host tonight's meeting. So only one more session to turn out for, and I hope to see you there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Childers. This is
Thank you. So good to see you, Mary.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
Bye.